Imagine you have a long-standing dream, your own car, and then the dream comes true. Pure joy. Life is beautiful because you wanted it so much. It's fantastic to drive your own car. You can go anywhere. So many emotions. Sometime later. Why won't you work? It's noisy. Damn it. The joy of the purchase fades, and the intense excitement of having your first car is no longer there. You start craving something more. Perhaps your dream wasn't strong enough, but now you have the real dream. Let's imagine that suddenly your new true dream becomes a reality. You become the owner of a Ferrari, a dream car, even though you also dreamed of your first car. Never mind. But this is different. Unbridled power, the roar of the engine, the incredible design, the beautiful red color. Such a car surely won't get boring, or will it? Unfortunately, even the Ferrari will eventually stop bringing joy. And your levels of happiness will return to what they were when you didn't even have your first car and were just dreaming of it. Sooner or later, our brain kills the joy of everything, including activities and possessions. This phenomenon is called hedonic adaptation, the tendency for people to hover around a relatively stable level of happiness and quickly return to that level after significant positive or negative events and changes in life. This term was coined in the early 70s by scientists Phil Brickman and Donald Campbell. They argued that the intensity of perception of any new stimulus depends on how it compares to previous stimuli. Our perception of, let's say, a strong scent, a loud noise, or high speed is also not constant, and our desires change, usually increasing with each satisfied need. That's why we can never be satisfied with what we have for long. The process of hedonic adaptation is based on neurobiological processes. Strong stimuli trigger overproduction of neurotransmitters, primarily dopamine and serotonin, to maintain a stable state. The nervous system reduces the number of receptors responding to them or decreases their sensitivity. It's a kind of protection against overdosing on positive or negative emotions. This mechanism is somewhat similar to drug addiction. Addictive behaviors like gambling, video games, pornography, extreme sports, or even watching political news can also decrease brain sensitivity. But why is this necessary? There are benefits to it because this mechanism keeps us from resting on our laurels. But the most important thing is that we can adapt to unpleasant experiences just as we do to pleasure. There is a study from 1978 that compared lottery winners with regular people. It claims that lottery winners, after a while, generally had the same or even lower subjective levels of happiness that people who didn't win the lottery. Similar results were obtained in another study observing people who had severe car accidents and lost the ability to use their legs. Initially, changes in abilities can be devastating, but after an adaptation period, people usually return to their pre-accident levels of happiness. Throughout my life, I've had various long-lasting illnesses that initially hindered me from living, but over time, you get used to them, and voila, you're happy despite them. Or maybe unhappy, but that's a completely different story. In reality, hedonic adaptation doesn't always lead to a dulling of sensations. Sometimes prolonged exposure to a strong stimulus leads to sensitization, an increase in hedonic response. For example, people who become seriously interested in music over time recognize more nuances in compositions, deriving more pleasure from the act of listening to music. And then comes the most interesting part. In 1996, scientists published the results of observing 1,000 pairs of twins, which revealed that genetics determine up to 50% of our emotional state. So, Some people are always cheerful and carefree, while others are gloomy and sad. Don't try to touch them. Nevertheless, researchers from Stanford claim that up to 40% of our emotional background can be changed through deliberate effort. This is quite heartening because much is within our control. So, what should you do? Acquire experiences, not things. Multiple studies have shown that experiences make people happier than material possessions. For example, it could be traveling or simply spending time alone. Firstly, we don't have time to adapt to very bright and short-lived stimuli. And secondly, the memory of the experience becomes the foundation of our memories, which our brain constantly distorts and embellishes. Thus, even by regularly revisiting memories, we can prolong the pleasure. But don't forget about variety. Pleasant sensations should not be monotonous, otherwise we obviously get used to them. For example, you can alternate between intense adrenaline-inducing experiences like parachute jumping and contrast it with a quiet evening under a blanket with your cat, which will seem divine, although it always does with the beloved cat. Sorry, that's a bad example. It's impossible to get used to that. So, what do we always need to understand from all of this? Don't take your life for granted. Miracles won't happen on their own. Life won't get better without your actions. The trick is that it may seem like everything is not that bad. Relationships can be worse, your salary isn't that low, and you can tolerate the government. In reality, we get used to everything and simply stop noticing the dire situation. Being amazed every day is very difficult, but it requires awareness and self-work. Don't go with the flow. Be the creator of your own happiness.